The first oversight clash between the Trump administration and the new Democratic majority on Capitol Hill tonight, where House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler may uncork one of the very first subpoenas against the top Trump official, Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, in this fight over testimony regarding the Mueller probe.
If Mr. Whitaker appears in the hearing room as scheduled, and if he provides direct answers to our questions, then I have no intention of ever actually issuing the subpoena. If he refuses to answer questions that he ought to answer, then we will have the tools we need to ensure that we may adequately meet our own responsibilities.
I don't know how this is going to shape up, but we do know it is very likely the final scuffle over Whitaker. I can report that tonight because today the Senate moved forward on his replacement, Bill Barr. It was a party line vote. Every single Democrat on the committee voting against him, citing those hearings, you may recall, where he just wouldn't give a very straight answer about releasing any future Mueller report.
Will you commit to making any report Mueller produces at the conclusion of his investigation available to Congress and to the public?
I am going to make as much information available as I can, consistent with the rules and regulations that are part of the special counsel regulations.
Democrats also doing more than just opposing Trump nominees, holding this hearing today about getting Trump's tax returns and also probing his personal finances, one likening it to an MRI for any Russian financing that benefited Trump, including they want to look at a, quote, extraordinary series of cash purchases Trump made in the decade before his campaign. Now, Trump is protesting that these are not fair investigations, but instead a kind of an abuse of the entire process to target him politically. Well, today, the speaker, who has been getting under Trump's skin, suggested that is a cynical view of the process, and she argues it's not only wrong, but revealing Donald Trump's own cynicism because she says he's actually projecting his view of law and order.
I am not commenting on what the president has to say about our work. I always think that whatever the president says about us, he's projecting his own unruliness. He's a projector. We will not surrender our constitutional responsibility for oversight. That would make us delinquent in our duties.
I'm joined by former Watergate Special Prosecutor Nick Ackerman and criminal defense attorney Caroline Polisi, who represented George Papadopoulos dealing with the Mueller probe. Nick, is he a projector? And what do you think is important about these probes alongside what Mueller's doing?
Well, I think they're important as a supplement to what Mueller's doing. I mean, I think they're being very careful not to actually step on Mueller's toes or into his investigation. But there are pieces of this that are clearly congressional responsibility. For example, the emoluments clause basically says that Trump can't get benefits from any of his businesses from foreign powers without the consent of Congress. So Congress has a major role to play in that. Congress is also looking at what he has done in the past in terms of his involvement with the Russian government. There have been allegations made, there's been concerns made that Trump is a puppet for the Putin government, and the idea that he had $400 million in cash to throw around to buy properties certainly goes to the congressional oversight to determine exactly what his relationship is with the Russian government. That's the job of Congress. That's what our checks and balances are all about, having another branch of government that's going to ensure that Mr. Trump is playing by the rules.
From an investigative view, does this look like a rich avenue to you, or does it look like overplaying their hand? If Mueller doesn't get into this stuff, what are they going to get, really?
Right. Well, I think Nick's right that Congress shouldn't necessarily step on Mueller's toes. But if you think of it in terms of a Venn diagram, I think they're two separate endpoints that they want to reach, right? Mueller is only looking at potential.
Venn diagrams are always overlapping.
That's right.
There's a lot of
You're
overlap.
You're talking about two diagrams.
two diagrams. No, one Venn diagram, but there's an overlapping piece. Well, criminal behavior is different than just a conflict of interest, and oftentimes just a plain old conflict of interest will not be charged criminally unless there's a quid pro quo bribery involved.
Right.
So that's a different standard than Mueller is operating from here. So Congress has the ability to look for those plain old just conflicts of interest that potentially Trump is beholden to the Russian government for, something that's not as blatantly obvious as, say, a criminal offense. Yes,
so, I mean,
exactly.
I want to make sure we're getting. Can we get this? We're pushing it. So you're saying there's what's bad, And then there's what's illegal, and then there's in the middle
That's exactly
is what,
right. And you could do the same thing for impeachable offenses and illegal.
I didn't go so far as to say bad.
You can have it. You know what? You could take it.
This could be unconstitutional,
Yes.
which could be the emoluments clause that could come into play.
Why are you so hot on that now, Oliver? That's been kicking around for a while.
Well, I think it's really important because no other president has ever been accused of violating the emoluments clause, making a profit on government service from foreign governments. I mean, that is a big issue. It has to do with a conflict of interest with the Saudis, with the Russians, and Qatar. I mean, there's a whole host of countries that he has been dealing with that are flocking into his hotels just to, curry favor with the president.
There's few things more swampy than letting anyone, foreign or domestic, but in the emoluments case, foreigners, buy their way in to influence what the government is supposed to do on behalf of Americans. I want to play an exchange from Fox News where Judge Napolitano, who you know, sort of lightly pushed back against a little conspiracy theory they had of saying, well, maybe Trump should just investigate the investigators. And he explained there's actually rules required to do that. But take a look.
Why not investigate Adam Schiff? Why not investigate Maxine Waters?
Couldn't they?
How did they become rich?
Well, I don't know the answer to that.
Why not investigate them? There could be no reason.
Because the Democrats control the Congress and they want to investigate their own.
Does the president have an attorney? Why doesn't the president just run a private investigation onto Adam Schiff?
Well, the president would, if he's going to use the power of the government to do anything, has to do it through the DOJ, and there has to be evidence of some criminal
Not
behavior.
the other way around.
It's a little lesson about how it works.
Well, this is exactly how it works. But this is exactly what Nixon did. I mean, he ran investigations on people because he had an enemies list, that people he just didn't like politically. He felt that were people that were against him politically. You don't start an investigation just because somebody's investigating you. I mean, Adam Schiff is carrying out his normal constitutional responsibilities. He's supposed to be looking at things like this.
Right.
You don't go a tit for tat on this just because I'm being investigated. I'm going to investigate you. A criminal investigator comes up with some kind of at least probable cause or reason to believe that a crime is being committed, and that's what starts an investigation.
Well, and doesn't this bring us full circle with Speaker Pelosi's critique, which is there seems to be a real abiding cynicism among some of these individuals that look at all of this as a kind of a targeting game and not something where there's actual evidence that leads to the investigation and whatever findings come out of it.
Yeah, and we saw that initially in sort of the witch hunt narrative, and that has to do, again, with the Mueller probe, and now it's being sort of deflected onto Congress as presidential harassment. So it's kind of a victimhood that he's playing, that, that he's being investigated for things that maybe he shouldn't, he shouldn't be held accountable to that everybody else would.
Right, and it's more rhetorical. Well, Caroline Polisi, who has litigated with the Mueller probe.
Yes.
And Nick Ackerman, who's obsessed with the Mueller probe. I appreciate both of you being here. I turn now immediately to someone you may have heard of, Lanny Davis, who has been Michael Cohen's legal advisor. A judge ruling today the feds will be releasing some of the materials that are pertinent to the raid on Cohen's home and office. Lanny, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ari.
What is the meaning of that decision? What might we learn out of it?
I really don't know, other than to describe the Cohen family and Michael's relief that a lot of personal items, including children's cell phones and lots of non-legal items, were seized, and he's been asking for them back, especially since if he's going to be going to prison, there's a lot of personal effects before he leaves his family. So I'm sure he's relieved at this decision. I believe it should have happened before now.
One of the things I've noticed in watching some of the Mueller developments since we last spoke, you had Roger Stone complain about the way that he was raided and treated, and Trump and some of his allies really jump on that. Your client, Mr. Cohen, even before he pled, had publicly said that he found the FBI agents professional. He didn't go that route. What do you think of this sort of selective outrage by some of the folks caught up in this probe about law enforcement techniques?
Well, first of all, you're correct. Michael Cohen not only hasn't said the criticisms that we've heard from I don't know if Mr. Stone is criticized, but others have about the raid. But he actually thanked the FBI agents for their courtesy and offered them cups of coffee. He's a lawyer, and he respects people that are professionally doing their job. One of the first things Michael said to me during the weeks leading up to his decision and my decision to go public on July 2nd of last year, is when he said that when Donald Trump started to attack the FBI and the intelligence community, he recognized that it's one thing for Mr. Trump to be erratic as a businessman. It's another thing for him to attack the institutions that are the basic framework of our republic. And he respects the FBI greatly.
I want to push you on the process here, which I know you don't fully control, but we have gone, I think in fairness, from talk of a public blockbuster John Dean-style hearing to then a closed hearing to now a delayed closed hearing. I want to play for you Congressman Schiff on that postponement and get your response to all of it. Take a listen.
Look forward to his testimony on February 28th, and Mr. Cohen has been fully cooperative with us, and we hope and expect that will continue. But we felt it was in the investigation's interest that we postponed to that date.
He says investigative interest to postpone. Can you speak with any more detail to why it was postponed and whether it will be postponed again? Is February 28th a hard date now? Are we going to have this happen before, of course, the other deadline of Mr. Cohen reporting to prison?
Well, first of all, there's nobody who is more professional and I think makes me proud to be a Democrat than Chairman Schiff. And he's always conducted himself in a balanced and fair way, and he's treated Mr. Cohen that way. I believe he will treat the Republicans on his committee that way as compared to the way he was treated when the Republicans were in the majority. So what he said was correct about Mr. Cohen respecting him and cooperating with him, and expects to appear on the 28th, although nothing is certain, as we would say tonight, that it's likely but not certain that he will appear and express himself publicly, as opposed to the Intelligence Committee, which has to be in classified.
When would the public one be?
That would be probably late in February, before Mr. Schiff, not quite certain. But I can say tonight the word likely, but I can't say definite.
Just to make sure I understand, and then I'm going to bring in a member of Congress as well. You're saying it is more likely than not that Michael Cohen would publicly testify before a different committee or different body before February 28th?
And very specifically, the level of cooperation and trust that he has developed with Chairman Elijah Cummings, who is a man for almost half a century, a leader of the civil rights movement, a minister in his church in Baltimore, and I've heard him preach, and somebody who empathizes with Michael Cohen's fear and his family's fear when the President of the United States launches all the power of the presidency, the bully in the bully pulpit using Twitter to call him a rat for telling the truth while praising people who refuse to tell the truth. And that word rat has a special meaning when you're in prison. His so-called lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, associated his father-in-law with the mob because he said on a rival network, well, after all, he's from Ukraine. And what Michael Cohen has realized, that Chairman Cummings, if he testifies, will protect him with the cloak of fairness. Right. And we hope that there is more effort by the institution to protect him against a bully and someone acting like a mobster who happens to be president.
Stay with me, and I know you wanted to get that out. I want to bring in, as promised, Congresswoman Jackie Speier, who serves on the Intelligence Committee. Congresswoman, what do you think is important about this? And do you have any interest, even beyond your committee, in Mr. Davis saying tonight here on The Beat, on this show, that he expects Cohen to testify publicly as well at the end of February, that we may actually get that final hearing we've heard so much about?
Well, I think it would be really for the benefit of the public and for Michael Cohen himself, the opportunity to speak to the American people about what went on during his 10 years in service to Donald Trump, of the Trump organizations, and what he did in anticipation of that campaign for the presidency. I think the public would like to know, and I think Michael Cohen has been very clear in his efforts of wanting to come clean on everything. And I credit Lanny Davis with helping him through that decision-making.
And do you think that the hearings we've been hearing about basically this week that are wider than the legal process, financial leverage, other things that may be perfectly legal but problematic. What is the timeline for that? What are we going to learn from that process, or is that going to be a lot of sort of private investigative work that takes months or years to come to fruition?
So, Ari, what we're doing on the committee was what we wanted to do during all of last year, but we're shut down by the Republican majority. It is important for the Intelligence Committee and for the American people to know to what extent Russia was engaged with then entrepreneur Donald Trump in the many projects that he had around the world. And was there, and the big question is, was there a violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act? Was there money laundering going on? And I think those are questions that need to be answered, and it will help us understand why the president has been engaged in a bromance with Vladimir Putin for so long, why he tears up the interpreter's notes and then makes sure there isn't an interpreter around when he meets with Vladimir Putin. He's the president of the United States, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's time for him to put the country first. You know, and the emoluments clause, I might add, is not just the emoluments clause in terms of foreign money coming in. It's also an emoluments clause that applies if the president is making money off of events or properties in the United States where he's profiting from being the president. And that's why having his tax returns becomes so important.
Right. It's almost as if all the secrecy and all the looming foreign questions come together, as you put it in your answer there. Congresswoman Jackie Speier, thank you very much. Lanny Davis making some news tonight. Thanks to you as well. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.